This video is straight up not going to make much sense to you if you don't watch the previous one, which proves the existence of an intelligent and willed God, that is, a God that has a will. Go watch that first before you watch this. So, we're going to talk a little bit about the purpose of human life, that the Redditor seems to think is utterly subjective. Now, in order to do this, we need to talk about the fact of creation. And by doing this, we need to talk about God in eternity. Now, God in eternity has an intellect and a will. We concluded this in the last video. And therefore, we can see, because we aren't God, that God has chosen to act with his will. Now, God, being outside of time, can only carry out one action because there's nothing with God for them to be separated. However, how can this be if there are multiple things in the universe? How is it if events continue happening around us? Well, think about when you go to the shop, when you go to Tesco, or if you're American, if you go to Walmart. When you go to these shops, you do many subordinate tasks. You lock the car, you go into the shop, you pick up the grapes, you pick up a sandwich, you pick up perhaps clothes if you need them. There are certain acts included by virtue of that one act. I've forgotten the precise technical term, it's one used in moral theology, but I'm sure that if somebody very educated in at least the scholastic tradition comes in, they'll immediately correct me. The point is that there are certain subordinate acts that come from the one act of going into the Tesco. And likewise, even within those, you move your arm to grab the grapes. And a similar thing is going on with God. God creates the world in one act, but although that act contains all of the other subordinate things going on. Now, it is still one act, and it is more one act than you going into the Asda, because there's no differentiation in time or anything like this. God simply wills, and it occurs, as we read in the book of Genesis, if you would like a theological reference, but if you're a Redditor, you probably don't. Now, this being said, that means that not only because it was willed by God, but also because God is intellect, that there must be reason behind it, because will presupposes intellect. That everything that goes on within his act of creation must have some sort of reason, even if it's utterly unfathomable to us, because God acts on determinate things. God is determinate in what he does. And this includes the creation of human beings. So this must mean, therefore, that man has some sort of objective purpose, because it would be an offence to God's nature as an intelligent being to do something for no reason. In fact, I would argue that he's incapable of doing so, because the will is dependent on the intellect, or there is at least a very strong relationship between them. You cannot will something unless you know it in some sense first. And so therefore we know there must be some sort of objective purpose to our lives. We cannot simply have this state of being where everything is just subjective, bro, and you just get to make it up, because we as subordinate creatures, as creatures that have been brought about, have some sort of definitive purpose. Now, how would we determine this purpose? There are our instincts, our ordered instincts, which, when they act, they direct us towards the good. This doesn't always happen with human beings, though, because as we know, human beings are imperfect. We are utterly enslaved to error. We are drawn to those things that we know to be wrong, or worse yet, we are drawn to those things that we think are right, even if we know that they logically do not make sense. For instance, r/polyamory, as we've discussed earlier on. I think that most thinking people can tell that this is very much not a good idea, but still people nonetheless do it. But we still have an instinct towards the good, and towards the truth, and towards the beautiful. In fact, we can hardly help but be drawn to the good. In fact, the mere fact that things like r/polyamory are occurring indicates that somebody is finding some kind of good, but they are choosing to subordinate the greater goods so that they may pursue this lesser good. So, we can determine to some extent our purpose. Now, it would seem to me, since everything emerges from existence, and therefore existence has all of these things within it, that the highest thing that there could be to be pursued would be God. because God is this existence. God is pure existence with intellect and will. God has all of this that is in the creation, and indeed because of his infinity, infinitely exceeds the creation, and so therefore he becomes the highest thing to be pursued. So this is only what I can reason to through just natural theology, essentially, or natural anthropology. But as we read revealed texts such as the sacred scriptures, this becomes far more clear. But even people like Aristotle, who did not have this, knew that the meditation upon the unmoved mover was the single greatest thing that a human person could do because of the supremacy and majesty of such a being. And so, therefore, not only is it not your prerogative to decide what the highest good is, which is essentially what you're doing when you're saying that life is subjective and you can just do what you want, fam, but also it would seem, at least to me, and it would seem to most reasonable people, that the highest pursuit would be God. And therefore, we have discussed at length subjectivity and telos. We have a purpose. We pursue God, who is truth, who is existence, who is goodness, and who is beauty. And with that said, if you enjoy what I have just said here, and I don't expect you to have enjoyed it if you're a Redditor, please go to my Patreon and give me money so that I can keep making these. Also, if you're interested in Latin, I have Latin readers for sale up there, if you'd like to participate in that. If you want other people to comment on this, please share it. I would very much appreciate the sharing because it draws more eyes to the channel. Also, comment, get me to think. And finally, please like and subscribe. Thank you very much for watching.